He thought he was the king of New York, a billionaire who could crush a nobody with a single insult in a language she wasn't supposed to know. He looked at the waitress and saw a servant. He didn't realize he was looking at the woman who was about to buy his entire life. But this isn't just a story about revenge, it's about the silent pain of being invisible in a world that only values a price tag. It's a lesson that class isn't something you can deposit in a bank, and sometimes, the person pouring your water is the only one who truly knows your worth. The Pierre Hotel in Manhattan hummed with the sound of old money and high-stakes egos. At the Blackwood Charity Gala, a single plate cost more than most families earned in a year. Audrey Davis adjusted her heavy silver tray, her wrist throbbing with a sharp, familiar pain. To the men in bespoke suits, Audrey wasn't a person, she was a mechanism, a way for champagne to appear and empty glasses to vanish. At 24, Audrey lived behind a mask of polite indifference, hiding her messy brown hair under a black cap and her true identity under a uniform 2 sizes too large. Nobody talks about this particular pain, the soul-crushing weight of being the help in a room full of people who look right through you. It's a silent struggle to maintain your dignity when the world treats you like furniture. Audrey stood near Conrad Sterling, a 32-year-old real estate shark who had just displaced 300 families to build a luxury tower. Conrad was laughing with his sycophants, bragging about robbing the desperate. When a single drop of condensation from Audrey's tray landed on his charcoal suit, the shark finally bit. "You clumsy idiot!" Conrad snapped, loud enough to stop the music. He loomed over her, sneering at her life's earnings compared to his suit. He called her a street rat and demanded someone competent. Audrey bit her cheek, tasting copper, and bowed her head in a gesture of submission. She knew Conrad felt powerful in that moment, but he didn't know that the girl he just humiliated was the same girl who volunteered at the community center he was trying to bulldoze. Conrad thought he had put a servant in her place. He didn't know that Audrey was keeping a secret that would make his $50 million deal evaporate before the main course was even served. Conrad moved on to his real target, investors from the Tian Long Group. He needed their Chinese capital to fund his Kensington project. Audrey watched from the shadows, her adrenaline masking the sting of his insults. She saw Conrad switch to Mandarin, clearly wanting to show off. But it wasn't the polite business Mandarin of a scholar, it was crude, backroom slang. He jerked his head toward Audrey and told his associates, "Look at this waitress. She dresses like a beggar. How can our meeting have this kind of low-class person present?" He looked Audrey in the face, a cruel smile playing on his lips, and asked in Mandarin, "Do you understand what I'm saying, stupid pig?" Audrey replied in perfect English, "Sorry, sir," feigning ignorance. Conrad laughed, telling his investors it was hard to get good help these days. He was soaring on his own perceived brilliance, unaware that his investors were staring at him with growing disgust. They valued character, Conrad had just proven he had none. Nobody talks about the pain of holding your tongue when someone attacks your very humanity. It's a silent battle to stay calm when every instinct tells you to scream. But Audrey wasn't going to scream, she was going to dismantle him. She set her tray down with a sharp clink that silenced the circle. She squared her shoulders, the submissive slouch vanishing instantly. She looked Conrad dead in the eye and switched to refined, aristocratic Mandarin. "Mr. Sterling, if you want to insult me in Mandarin, please at least use accurate vocabulary." The silence that followed was absolute. Conrad's glass froze halfway to his mouth as the beggar he'd mocked began speaking with the voice of a dragon. By the time he realized he'd insulted the wrong woman, his investors were already standing up to walk out. As the investors walked away, Conrad's arrogance fractured into a desperate, ugly rage. He tried to have Audrey fired, screaming for security, but Mr. Shao, the lead investor, turned back with a final, crushing blow. "You speak with the voice of a rat. We are finished." Audrey untied her apron, leaving it with the panicked manager. "Keep it," she said calmly. "I won't be needing it anymore." She walked out with her head high, but she wasn't headed home to cry. She was headed to a waiting black sedan where her head of security, Simon, was waiting. Nobody talks about the pain of living a double life, the exhaustion of pretending to be less than you are just to see the truth of the world. Audrey wasn't Audrey Davis, she was Audrey Vanderwall, the reclusive heir to a legacy that built half of Manhattan. For 6 months, she had worked minimum wage jobs in her family's own hotels to see which sharks were worth doing business with. Conrad Sterling had just failed the ultimate test. In her Tribeca penthouse, the waitress was dead, and the CEO had arrived. She reviewed the data. Conrad was hemorrhaging money and had a $40 million payment due. Without the Chinese investment, he was insolvent. Audrey smiled, a dangerous, cold expression. "Grant him the meeting," she told her analyst. "Tell him the managing partner of Phoenix Capital will see him personally." She knew Conrad would never recognize the waitress in a $5,000 power suit because he had never actually seen the waitress at all. The next morning, Conrad marched into Phoenix Capital, begging for a life raft. He was about to sign over his life's work to a woman he'd called a pig less than 12 hours ago, and the moment of revelation was going to be more than his ego could survive. In the obsidian-walled boardroom, Audrey sat with her back to the window, watching Conrad pace like a caged animal. When she finally spoke, her voice lacked the subservient tremble he expected. She offered to buy his debt in exchange for the deed to the Kensington block. Desperate and cornered, Conrad signed the papers, snapping that he would burn this company down once he found out who she was. Audrey just smiled. "I look forward to it, Conrad." But the unmasking came sooner than he thought. At the Vanderwall Winter Gala, Conrad burst in, clutching photos of Audrey in her waitress uniform, shouting to the elite crowd that she was a fraud and a spy who mocked the poor for kicks. The room went silent. Audrey stepped to the microphone, her midnight blue gown shimmering. "You're right, Conrad," she said softly. "I was a waitress. I did it because you cannot lead people if you do not understand their labor. You cannot own a building if you don't know the name of the person who mops its floors." She played the recording of him calling her a pig in Mandarin for the entire ballroom to hear, including the mayor and the police commissioner. Conrad was escorted out in handcuffs, bankrupt and broken, as the room erupted in a standing ovation. Not for the billionaire, but for the waitress who stood up to a bully. Nobody talks about this pain, the realization that we often judge people by the costume they wear. We live in a world that values the suit over the soul. But real power doesn't come from a bank account, it comes from the character you show when you think no one of importance is watching. Audrey Vanderwall's journey is a reminder that you should never mistake silence for weakness. The person you think is a nobody might just be the one holding all the cards. Always lead with kindness, because in the end, your reputation is the only currency that doesn't depreciate.
A song plays softly in the back of my mind. It's you I'm missing, can't leave you behind. The moonlight flickers through the broken glass. Each shard reflects the moments from our past. A melody we built, now told